So it's been a while since our last devlog. I have so much to show you and so little time to be able to do it, so let's dive right into it. Veil of Maia is a metroidvania where you play as a warrior monk who leaves his humble ashram to fight the darkness that's spreading across the land. In our last devlog, we really honed in on making our main mechanic, telekinesis, as fun and juicy as possible. We got some playtesters to give us some feedback, and based on that, we were able to make some massive improvements to it. And after that video, my plan was just to make the next mechanic and then make a devlog for that, and then that would be it, quick and easy. And I did get the new mechanic in there, and it's working as intended, and everything's working great now. But nothing could have prepared me for the several month-long nightmare that I was about to embark on when I started making this mechanic. Let me tell you what happened. So first off, here's the new mechanic, and it's kind of a grapple hookshot combo. And there's no shortage of references for grapples being used in games, but honestly, I can't think of a lot of examples of 2D grapples being done well in 2D Metroidvania games. Super Metroid is one of my favorite games of all time, but its grapple mechanic is just awful. Axiom Verge was a Metroidvania that I loved, but I was also really disappointed by its grapple mechanic. Even Ori and the Will of the Wisps, it had a grapple that was fun to use and felt really good, but it was limited because you could only grapple to specific objects. It looks like Silksong has some sort of grapple attack, and if the game ever releases, we'll see how good it is. I have faith in Team Cherry. It'll release soon. Right? Now, it makes sense that grapples, especially in Metroidvanias, have to be limited in how they can be used, because often in Metroidvania games, certain parts of the world are blocked off due to your character's movement limitations. You can't jump high enough, you can't dash far enough, etc., etc. Level design and movement limitation are often something that go hand in hand in Metroidvania design, but that is future Brandon's problem. You can basically already fly in Veil of Maia. And if Super Metroid could pull off the screw attack that lets you basically jump forever, then I figured we can pull off having a very free and open to use grapple mechanic. It'll probably be a late game ability, maybe, we'll see. So the idea right from the start is to have a grapple that you can use basically anywhere. So long as you hit a wall or the ceiling or the floor, you will grapple towards that point. There's not going to be any specific grappleable blocks or anything like that. But I also want this to be used as an attack. So if you were aiming the grapple towards an enemy, then you were going to damage that enemy as soon as you make contact with it. So this one mechanic needed to be broken down into two, really. And depending on what you're aiming on, it'll change from either a spring joint launch or to a transform launch. The spring launch uses a spring joint for the physics of the grapple, whereas the transform just really moves you in a straight line from point A to point B. And the transform is what will be used for the grapple attack. Now, this obviously doesn't look punchy enough, so I spent way too much time creating a shader for this ring that gets spawned in. But you can thicken it up and you can dissolve it out, and in the end, it added quite a lot. I really like it. Now, I'm quite the beginner when it comes to creating shaders from scratch, but after making this, I was feeling pretty confident. So I went about starting the shader for the actual grapple line material. And this was one of my first attempts. I lost my confidence pretty quickly after this, but eventually I did manage to pull something together that I was very happy with. Now, so far, this is kind of acting more like a hook shot than a grapple. A grapple lets you swing, I think. Don't quote me on that. The point is, for my game, I want you to be able to swing when you're using the grapple, and be able to shorten or lengthen the rope. Think Worms Armageddon, and oh, I miss that game so much. I should play it again sometime. So when the player is grappling, we're just using physics forces to move him to create the swing, and you can just tweak the distance field on the spring joint here in order to shorten or lengthen the grapple rope. And now you have a lot of freedom to be able to use this grapple in any way you want, basically anywhere you want. It's really awesome, but there do have to be some limitations. In the early stages of this game, I had the idea that I wanted most of the abilities in the game to not require using essence from the essence meter over here. What it was going to cost was additional cooldown time between ability uses, and that would basically work by adding the amount of time that it took you to aim your ability. It would take that amount of time and add it back into your initial cooldown. Now, I added this ability because time slows down when you aim, but I also wanted players to be able to freely use the abilities basically any time that they wanted to, but I don't want them to basically be cheesing the time slowdown to make certain fights too easy for themselves, so I thought that this additional cooldown was a good way to find a proper balance. But most of my playtesters just kind of found it confusing, and even I didn't like it that much after playtesting it for long enough, so I scrapped that functionality altogether. Now there's just a really super brief cooldown after aiming, just to still make sure that you don't abuse the time slowdown. But of course, with that all being scrapped, the abilities can't be free anymore. So now it does cost essence essence to use the grapple. Now, I really liked the idea of being able to gain back some of your essence when you used a grapple attack successfully on enemies, but currently it's just way too easy to do. So I was thinking of implementing some sort of quick time event where if you press a button at just the right moment during the attack, then you would gain back a certain percentage of the essence that you spent on the grapple. Let me know what you think of that idea down in the comments below. I'm curious. I have not implemented that yet. You'll notice that there's even more particles now. I wanted this ability to be really juicy. You get nice big ones when you make an impact on an enemy, and some nice little ones come out of the staff when you're just swinging around. And for the normal grapple, I really wanted a nice explosion of particles coming out at the impact point. And I have no idea what happened here. So I tried again, and honestly, maybe I was out of coffee that day or something. I have no idea what I was trying to do here, but I got it working nicely in the end. One more thing my playtesters complained about was the camera when you were aiming. They said it made them dizzy, and I think even one person said it made them nauseous, and I don't know why they're being such a bunch of babies. One sec. Anyways, so I'm using a camera target group in order to average the camera between the player and the aim point. The problem is that the aim point moves literally as fast as you can move the analog stick, which is obviously really fast, and there was no damping or anything like that applied. So the camera is averaging between the player and an invisible game object that spawns at the end of the aim line, wherever it's hitting. So what I did to fix this was to lerp the invisible game object using some questionable math, but this object now smoothly moves towards the aim point, and the farther the distance that invisible object is to the aim point, then the faster it's going to move, which is fantastic. And then finally, I was just putting some finishing touches on the ability, and I was trying to tweak some of the camera shake settings for the grapple. That was going to be it. I was just about finished, but then something happened. I kinda just snapped. Trying to adjust some of the screen shake settings, I was digging through some of my old code and I just could not take it anymore. It's now quite apparent that I am a far better programmer now than I was when I first started this project. And looking at this old code just made me wanna... And this kind of started this whole chain reaction of refactoring, bug fixing, reworking old systems, and I got sucked into this vortex that lasted months. But I am so glad I did. I started with the movement and jump code, actually. I had been wanting to rework this forever. My player controller was halfway decent, but it was a little bit stiff, so I tossed all the movement code and started completely from scratch. The perfect system for me was a system that gave me as many tweakable options as possible, and I have many tweakable options now. Obviously, it has all the modern platformer goodies like coyote time, jump buffering, apex hang time, double jump, all that good stuff. I even redid the dash code. Now, none of this looks that much different, but it feels so much better to play now. Now, after I was done replacing all of the movement code, I thought it deserved some particles. So there's just nice dust trails and all that good stuff for all the movement abilities. I even finally added a tiny little feature to the movement system that I've been wanting to implement forever, which is the ability to cancel out of your dash by either jumping or attacking. There's no excuse from taking damage from the dash now because you have full control and the ability to cancel out of it at any time. I changed the knockback code so that you can actually fight back against the knockback a little bit because it still takes input into account now. I fixed over a dozen bugs, some of which have been around since the very early days of the game. I made some small performance optimizations. I refactored all my player data so that it's much more organized than it was before. And I even spent several days just cleaning up old comments, unused variables, and all sorts of just junk in my code. I tweaked my audio system so that it adds a slight randomization to the pitch and the volume every time it plays a sound effect. That just adds to it feeling a little bit more organic and a little bit more natural. And finally, I got back to the screen shake, which started all of this. And I created a super robust system that scales very well, and it gives me an insane amount of control. I'm very proud of it. So with all of these changes in mind, let's give it a proper test. One final thing, I just want to see what's inside this chest here. Bye guys, see you in the next one.